Rant.
Actually, that may have been me.
Hello, and welcome to Film Rant. Cards on the table here. I didn't really like Deadpool 1, as you can see if you watch my review. I think it's okay, but I just think it's way overrated and lacks any kind of genuine creativity. I just want to say that because my opinion on Deadpool was soured somewhat. However, I do like the character and I do think Ryan Reynolds is a joy to watch, so I was excited to get a second Deadpool. It's a shame that not a single one of the trailers made me think the movie looked good. It looked okay at best, but I went to see it just to see if I'd be surprised. And I was in some respects, but ultimately I think Deadpool 2 is mostly the same problems as the first. I'm going to discuss how by going into spoiler territory, so don't continue on if you're wary of spoilers. Ryan Reynolds absolutely nails it as Deadpool once again with a hilarious performance. His comedic timing and delivery are absolutely spot on. I've heard it said often that Reynolds was born to play Deadpool, and he really was. It's genuinely hard to see the line where Ryan Reynolds ends and Deadpool begins, which makes his character that much easier to get invested in. I enjoyed Josh Brolin as Cable. I don't know much about Cable from the comics except that he's not 5'11" like Deadpool points out. I did like his Terminator-esque character though. I thought his look was very cool and he came across a bit like a homage to cliched 80s action heroes, just not as on the nose as someone like Kung Fury is. Maybe Cable isn't meant to be that at all, but I love this kind of Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon vibe I got from him. Sure, he's cliched and unoriginal as hell, but he was fun. The villain is without doubt the most interesting part of the movie. I think this is the first superhero movie I've seen where the villain is actually a full-on child, like a 14-year-old kid. In an age where kids are going back to their old schools and gunning down professors and fellow students, we get a 14-year-old villain who goes back to his old faculty and tries to murder his professor who mistreated him. He also goes on to kill many more in Cable's reality. So yeah, Deadpool's villain is a school shooter. I like that he wasn't obviously a villain from the start, more like a troubled kid with issues, who eventually finds comfort in Deadpool, even if he is still driven to exact revenge on the professor who tortured him. What's particularly interesting about this movie is that you kind of side with the school shooter. You should never be able to have a narrative where this idea works, but it really does. We can agree that the piece of shit professor who's been torturing kids just for being different deserves a swift katana through the sack, and Russell wants to do just that, so I can totally side with his viewpoint. But Deadpool knows that it can lead down a very dark path, so it was interesting to see Deadpool tell the kid not to murder his professor, not just in order to save Cable's family, but to save the kid himself. That was interesting character growth for Deadpool himself, given we've seen him mercilessly slaughter and tear apart people in the past. This whole movie is kind of about Deadpool becoming more compassionate and learning to actually help people for other reasons than his own, and it works, for the most part. Domino was an okay side character. She had some decent lines and her fight scenes were cool to watch, but like the side characters in the first movie, there's nothing really interesting about her as a person. I feel in both Deadpool movies, side characters are thrown a little too far to the side in order for Deadpool to hog the spotlight, which makes sense given Deadpool's character, but I just want a bit more from his mates. Sadly for me though, I feel Deadpool 2 is just more of the same from Deadpool 1. Aside from a bit of character development and a decent villain, Deadpool 2 still hasn't fixed any of the issues I had with the first one, namely playing with the formula. Deadpool is renowned as a character who knows he's in a piece of media, whether it be a comic, game or movie. The most they play with the formula here is when he says either cue the music or that's just lazy writing. I want to see him do more. I want to see him grab hold of the camera and move it away if something gory happens. I want to see Cable look for Deadpool but he can't find him because Deadpool steps out of frame or out of the black bars. I want to see him use the camera so he can see behind himself. Stuff like that, clever things that actually make use of the fact that this guy knows he's in a movie and can use that to his advantage. He could even edit the script if he wanted, but that might be a bit too much power and could make the movie collapse in on itself like TJ Miller's career. This is the biggest issue with Deadpool though. It just isn't creative enough with all of the tools it has at its disposal. Most of the humour in this is swearing and dick jokes, which is fine, but it's not exactly what I'd call intelligent, high-effort humour. Ironically, Deadpool movies are meant to be those superhero movies that aren't for kids, but the humour is almost exclusively for teenagers. I think Deadpool was hilarious when I was 14, but when I watch it now, I just find it so uninspired. I could write things like Deadpool 2 makes me want to cry in the bath while listening to Natalie Imbruglia and lightly tickling my sack to comfort me, which is exactly the kind of lines you hear in this movie, and I'm not even a writer. It's easy to write 90% of the jokes in Deadpool. Twice in the movie Deadpool says that's just lazy writing, and he's fucking right. Most of the jokes in here sound like they're the first things the writers thought of, and I just sit there thinking, yeah, it's not bad, but it's not clever, and it makes me think no effort is being put into the writing at all, which leaves a sour taste in the mouth. I don't know, maybe I'm just a miserable twat because people around me in the theatre were laughing their tits off at pretty much everything Deadpool did, but I was bored of the base, low-effort dick jokes by the end of the first movie. I know Deadpool did well, so the writers probably thought, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, which is cool, but it comes to something when Avengers Infinity War, which is actually marketed for people of all ages, takes more clever and adult risks than Deadpool could ever hope to take. For about half of Deadpool 2, there's really not any plot. There's stuff going on and events that take place, but none of it appears to be going anywhere. There's no direct villain introduced until Cable appears, and if you already know that he's not a villain, it feels like a lifetime until Russell turns into the villain. I enjoyed the plot in the end though, so I'm not knocking it, I just think the movie takes a while to find its feet and get going. One element of the movie I was surprised by and enjoyed was the more vulnerable side of Deadpool that we saw. This was a Deadpool that genuinely wanted to die and his superpowers stopped him from getting what he wants. He learns to be more compassionate while also showing real emotional pain. That's not something you'd expect to see after the first movie. Deadpool is a walking joke machine who pretty much just deflects any emotional trauma that comes his way, but in Deadpool 2 he's much more open, and when his powers are temporarily gone, he really is more vulnerable in every sense of the word. Part of what allowed Deadpool to be so vulnerable was the surprise death of Morena Baccarin, which I really didn't see coming. I figured after her lack of screen time in Deadpool 1 she'd be a much more prominent figure in Deadpool 2, so to see her killed very early on took me by surprise. Sure, Deadpool goes back in time at the end and saves her so she's not dead anymore, but I'm glad they put this in to allow Deadpool to open up. I didn't expect to see that in this movie, but I really enjoyed this aspect, so cred where cred's due. The short post-credit scenes are absolutely worth staying for. The first showing Deadpool getting Cable's time-travelling device after Teenage Warhead fixes it, followed by him going back and saving Morena Baccarin and Peter. Peter should and will be your favourite character, by the way. He's a sweet cuddly teddy bear with the heart of a lion. Both of these scenes are a nice way to tie up the film, but it's the following two scenes that are comedy gold. The first shows Ryan Reynolds as Wolverine's Wade Wilson as he stood in front of Hugh Jackman. Deadpool comes in and kills him, which was a great nod to how terrible Wade Wilson was in that movie. Pretty good in-joke if you're familiar with the X-Men movies. The second scene is also a good in-joke if you're familiar with Ryan Reynolds' career. We see Reynolds reading a script and hear him say, "You're in the big leagues now," before the reveal that the script he's reading is for Green Lantern. Deadpool shoots Ryan Reynolds in the head and says, "You're welcome, Canada." Both of these scenes were top bands and I really loved them both. I'd like to see these kinds of scenes in the actual movie as opposed to being post-credits, but I'll take what I can get. On a similar note, I was wondering if they'd cut out TJ Miller from the movie given he, called in bomb threats to people a few weeks ago as well as being accused of sexual assault and physical assault over the past year or so. They didn't cut him in the end as he's a fairly important part of Deadpool's entourage, but then it came to me. For added bants, what if they used TJ Miller as the villain in Deadpool 3 where he plays himself? I've never liked the guy, so I'd be totally on board with him being a villain. They'd never do it of course, but damn. Imagine it. From a technical standpoint, there is some very dodgy CGI in Deadpool 2. The most noticeable scene was a scene in which Domino is walking down the city street showing off how lucky she is, and there's lots of crazy shit going on around her. Cars flipping over her head, cars driving into petrol stations, then exploding. Ironically, Deadpool says to her during the scene, "Look." Well, that isn't very cinematic, and he's absolutely fucking right because the whole scene looks like horse shit. I don't know if it was rushed or they just didn't have the budget to do it properly, but it really is sci-fi levels of bad CGI. There's a few more noticeable moments in the movie. Juggernaut looks questionable, and when he's throwing Deadpool around it looks a bit too keyframed. Maybe they blew the whole budget on Cable because he looks fucking great. What doesn't look great though is both Deadpool movies as a whole. I'm really not a fan of the colour and overall look of these movies. I just think they look a bit dull. There's lots of grey and concrete in these movies, and with Deadpool having such a vibrant red and black suit with bright white eyes, I thought these movies would have a much more colourful look. I'd love to see Matthew Vaughn get a hold of this franchise and really make a colourful, cleverly scripted movie, but I live in hope. I don't think they're ever going to change the muddy look of Deadpool movies, so I'll never be a fan. Expect the same criticism in my Deadpool 3 review in about 2 years. Overall, Deadpool 2 is an average if moderately enjoyable sequel that struggles to tread much new ground. There's an interesting vulnerable side to Deadpool and a genuinely well executed villain, but aside from those, this movie suffers from the same issues I've found in the first. The comedy is mostly lazy, the formula is played with less than a monk's dick, see how easy it was for me to write that joke, and once more, the whole thing just reeks of missed opportunity. I'm almost certain you could cross-reference this review with my review of the first Deadpool, and it's pretty much verbatim. There is some genuinely good comedy though, such as the post-credit scenes and a few one-liners and visual gags, but it's ultimately really uninspired base comedy that's hilarious to teenagers but doesn't quite land for miserable pricks like me. I want Deadpool to have more creative people in charge. Ryan Reynolds can deliver anything you throw at him when he's in that suit, so please Marvel, get someone talented to direct and write one of these movies and you could have a real gem instead of just, haha yeah, Deadpool, he's good, kind of movie. Up the ante. Deadpool 2 gets 3 frames out of 5. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Film Rant.
And that is why Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants is pure pornography.
Oh, God, I wish I finished college.